I never thought he'd call me by my name again, let alone to sign something. We were sitting in the back seat of a rental car, parked outside a small legal office on a grey street in Evanston, just north of Chicago. It was one of those still mornings. No wind, no sound, just the muffled hum of passing cars and the thick quiet that stretches between two people who used to be family. The driver, an older man with thinning hair and a bored expression, was tapping something on his phone up front. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence in the car was already unbearable. My father sat beside me, holding out a black Parker pen, the same kind he used when I was a kid, and I'd watch him sign checks at the kitchen table, squinting over his glasses. His hands were thinner now, more brittle, like old branches, the knuckles swollen, the veins raised like ropes. He looked older than I remembered, smaller, diminished. "This is all that's left," he said, not looking at me. "Just sign here." His voice was raspy, like he hadn't used it much lately. The document was folded neatly in a manila envelope. He pulled it out and smoothed it over his knee like it was a delicate thing, like it mattered. It was a property transfer form, something about an old house out in Iowa, a plot of land and a modest bank account. I didn't ask questions. I hadn't asked anything in 20 years. I reached for it, more out of reflex than interest. My name was printed at the bottom. Thomas Whitaker. A signature line waited beside it. I stared at the paper, my eyes drifting down, barely absorbing the words, until I saw the date. August 12th. I blinked. Surely I misread it. But no, there it was again, printed clearly beside the line. Executed this 12th day of August. The same day. The same cursed date I'd tried to forget for 2 decades. I looked up. He was still holding the pen out to me, but his gaze was somewhere else, on the seat in front of him, or maybe years behind us. I said it quietly, without anger, just the truth. "Look at the date." Everything stopped. The pen slipped from his fingers and landed softly between us. He didn't move. The air inside the car turned heavier than steel. He looked down at the document, then up at me. And for the first time in my adult life, my father looked like he might break. "I didn't remember," he whispered. But I did. I remembered every second. August 12th, the day my mother died, and the day he threw me out of the house. It's strange how silence can grow louder than any scream. He sat there motionless, like the weight of the paper had suddenly become too much. I watched his lips tremble slightly, his hands resting on his knees like they didn't know where else to go. The date sat there between us, a tiny string of numbers with 20 years of silence coiled inside it. "I didn't remember," he said again, softer this time. Like repetition might make it truer. I looked out the window where the morning light was barely pushing through the clouds. Across the street, a woman helped her son tie his shoelace. I envied them. How ordinary their world must have felt. "You always remembered," I said, not accusingly, just plainly. His breath caught, and he shook his head once, not in denial, but in something like shame. Maybe regret. I couldn't tell anymore. He turned slightly toward me. "It wasn't about that." "Yes, it was," I said. My voice was steady, but I felt the ground shifting under me. It's always been about that day. I remember it like it happened in a loop, burned into me. It was August 12th, 20 years ago, my mother's birthday, and the day we buried her. The whole family stood in the cemetery under a sky too blue for a funeral. My father was stone-faced, not a tear in sight. I tried to read a letter I had written to her. My hands shook, my voice cracked. I didn't make it halfway through before he interrupted me. "Enough," he'd said. "We don't need theatrics." I never forgave him for that. I never got to say goodbye. That night, we fought. I screamed. He didn't. He just stood at the top of the stairs and told me I had no place in that house anymore. So I left. A suitcase, a backpack, and 20 years of distance. Now here we were, in a rental car, pretending we were strangers trying to handle business. "What do you want from me, Dad?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. He turned the document over, folded it, unfolded it. Then finally his voice cracked open. "I didn't call you because of the house," he said, "or the money." "Then why?" "Because I wanted to see if you'd come." I sat back, the seat creaking under me. My hands felt numb. "Well, I did." We sat in silence again. The driver coughed quietly up front, probably wondering what was taking so long. But I wasn't in a rush anymore. He picked up the pen again, but his hand hovered. "I didn't know it was today," he said. "God help me, I didn't know." And for the first time, I didn't know if I believed him. He looked at me and I saw something shift in his face, like a dam cracking, not bursting, but giving way just enough to let truth leak out. "I've been forgetting a lot of things lately," he said, almost to himself. "Names, appointments, days." He paused. "But not that day. Not entirely." I didn't respond. I was afraid to. Afraid of what might spill out of me if I opened my mouth. Anger, maybe. Or something worse. Grief. He placed the pen on the seat between us again, gently this time, like he didn't trust his own grip. "I've been sick," he said, eyes still not meeting mine. "They found something last spring, pancreas. It's not good." The words landed without ceremony, no apology wrapped around them, no dramatics, just facts. I should have felt something, shock, sadness, even some cruel vindication, but all I felt was cold. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling slightly. I curled them into fists. "Why did you call me now?" I asked again, softer this time. He turned his head toward the window. His voice was quieter than before, but steadier. "Because I've been thinking about that day every night. And because the only thing worse than dying," he said, "is dying with no one left to tell the truth to." The truth. That was the word that rattled in my chest. All these years I had built a wall around that memory. I replayed it like a tape, his anger, his coldness, the door slamming behind me. I had never once imagined that there might be something I didn't know. "You told me to get out, that I was a disgrace," I said. "You didn't even let me finish reading her letter." His eyes closed for a moment. He swallowed hard. "I know." "Do you?" I said, louder now. "Do you have any idea what that did to me?" "I do," he whispered, "because it's been doing the same thing to me." The driver turned the ignition off, maybe to save gas, maybe because he knew this was going to take a while. I looked back at the document on my lap. The paper had begun to curl at the corners from how tightly I'd been holding it. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small object wrapped in a faded piece of cloth. He hesitated, then placed it carefully in my hands. "I kept this," he said. "It was hers." I unfolded the cloth slowly. Inside was a silver bracelet, thin and worn. The clasp bent slightly. I recognized it instantly. It was my mother's. "She wore it the day she died," he said, his voice hollow. "I found it on her nightstand. I couldn't bring myself to bury it with her." I stared at it for a long time, the metal cold against my skin. I remembered how it used to jingle faintly when she'd brush my hair or hug me from behind. He watched me, and for once he didn't look like a man defending himself. He looked like a man standing at the edge of something he wasn't sure he could cross. "Why now?" I asked again, this time barely a whisper. His answer came slowly, like it had taken years to form. "Because I can't fix what I broke," he said, "but maybe I can stop pretending it wasn't broken." The bracelet lay in my palm, like a fragment of someone I'd only been able to remember through photographs and pain. It was lighter than I remembered. Or maybe I was heavier. I ran my thumb along the clasp, feeling the tiny groove that had always stuck. I used to play with it as a child, tracing its shape while sitting in her lap. That was before everything got quiet, before silence replaced warmth in our house. "She used to wear this every Sunday," I said, "even when we didn't go to church." He nodded slowly. "She said it made her feel whole." His voice cracked on that last word. He didn't try to clear it. He just let it break. I looked at him again. Really looked. There were bags under his eyes that hadn't been there before, and a hollowness in his cheeks that no amount of weight loss could explain. He looked tired, not just physically, but like someone who had been carrying something for far too long. "You let me believe it was my fault," I said. He didn't deny it. He just nodded. "I know," he said. "I didn't have the strength to face what I did, so I gave it to you instead." My throat tightened. I turned the bracelet over in my hand again and again, as if spinning it might unwind the years between us. "Why did you do it?" I finally asked. "Why that day? Why push me out when we were already burying her?" He exhaled sharply, then leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like the answer might be hiding there. "I was angry," he said, "but not at you." "Then at who?" "At myself. At her. At God." He paused. "And maybe at how much you reminded me of her." That hit harder than I expected. "You hated that?" "No," he said quickly. "I was afraid of it." His hands were shaking now. "You read her letter out loud and it was like hearing her voice again. It undid me, and I couldn't let myself feel that. So instead he shut me out, locked the door on the only piece of her still alive in the house. I wanted to be angry, I really did. But the ache inside me had passed the point of rage. It had become something duller, something deeper, like longing. The truth he offered wasn't clean. It didn't undo the years or erase the pain, but it sat there, raw and trembling between us, and for the first time, it felt like he was bleeding with me. "I was 17, I said. "I didn't know how to carry any of that." "I know," he said, "and I made you carry mine too." I didn't speak. I just stared out the window again, where the clouds were finally starting to shift, letting in a pale stripe of sunlight across the sidewalk. Inside the car, everything felt still, but something between us, something old and rusted, had begun to loosen. He reached into the envelope again and pulled out another folded page, not legal, not formal, just handwritten, a letter by the look of it. "She wrote something else," he said. "Not the one you read. This one. She left it for me. I found it after the funeral. I couldn't read it. Not then." He held it out to me. "I want you to read it now." He handed me the letter with both hands, as if it were something fragile, something sacred. The paper was yellowed and soft at the edges, folded so many times the creases had worn thin. I didn't take it right away. Something about touching it felt too intimate, too close to a version of my mother I hadn't known still existed. But then I reached for it. His hands lingered for a moment longer, unwilling to let go. And when he finally did, it was as if he'd handed over a part of his soul. I stared at her handwriting, delicate and looping. The same script I remembered from lunchbox notes in elementary school, from Christmas tags she used to sign with little hearts. My chest tightened. I unfolded it slowly, afraid the paper might tear. The ink had faded in places, but her voice came through clear, quiet, almost like a whisper just behind my ear. "My dearest, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I'm sorry I didn't say more before the end. I wasn't brave enough. Not in the way I hoped to be. I know grief makes people do strange things. I know you'll hurt. You'll feel alone. And maybe you'll think it's safer to shut the door on everything that reminds you of me. Please don't, especially not on Thomas. He is you, and he is me, and he is also entirely himself. He feels things deeply. He remembers more than we know. He sees what we try to hide, and he forgives more easily than we deserve. He will need you, and you will need him, whether you know it now or not. Be kind, not just to him, to yourself too. There will be a day when it all feels too heavy, when you want to run from the sound of his voice, from the way he says my name, from the grief in his eyes. Stay, stay, because love will ask that of you, even when it hurts, especially then. Claire, my fingers gripped the edge of the page as I finished. I could barely breathe. I didn't look at him right away. I wasn't sure I could. I felt 14 again, sitting outside her hospital room with a stuffed bear and a list of questions I never got to ask. He was quiet beside me, still, as if the letter had taken his breath too. "She wrote that for you," I said. "And you didn't read it?" He shook his head. "I found it in her jewelry box. I saw my name on the envelope and I couldn't. I put it away and told myself I'd read it someday." "Someday?" I echoed. He nodded. But the days kept passing, and I kept not being ready. I swallowed hard. You were scared. I still am. There it was, the truest thing he'd said so far. I held the letter against my chest, pressing it to a place that still felt broken. My mother had written those words knowing he might not read them in time, or at all. But she wrote them anyway, as if hope had a longer memory than grief. And now, 20 years later, her voice had found us again. We sat in silence, not like before, not that cold, punishing quiet. This one was warmer, heavier, but softer. He looked over at me, eyes glassy. I should have given it to you years ago. I nodded. Yeah, you should have. And then I added, not because I wanted to, because something inside me needed to. But I'm glad you gave it to me now. The bracelet was still in my palm, the letter folded neatly in my lap, as if they were holding me together in the places I hadn't realized were still cracked open. I leaned back against the seat, letting the moment settle. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if anything needed to be said right then. My father sat beside me, staring at the dashboard like it was the only thing in the world still certain. For the first time, he looked small, like someone who had finally run out of places to hide. I used to dream about this, I said quietly. He looked over. About what? This, sitting with you, talking, her name being spoken out loud again without it feeling like a curse. He nodded, slowly. I dreamed of it too, he admitted, but every time I was too late. You never looked at me. I turned toward him, surprised by the honesty in his voice. And now, I'm not sure if I still deserve to be seen. His eyes were red. He wasn't trying to hide it anymore. I wanted to say something comforting, but I also didn't want to lie. The truth was, a part of me still carried that 17-year-old's hurt like armor. Even with everything laid bare between us, forgiveness didn't just appear like magic. It was slow, stubborn, real. But I did see him now, not as the unshakable figure who threw me out, not as the angry, hollow man at my mother's funeral. I saw him as someone afraid, someone unraveling, someone trying, and maybe that counted for something. You know, I said, glancing at the letter, she believed in us more than we ever believed in each other. He smiled faintly, the corner of his mouth twitching like it didn't remember how to. She always did that, he said. Loved us more than we deserved. The driver cleared his throat from the front seat, quiet, polite, reminding us that the world still moved on outside the car. My father looked out the window. We should go in, he said. Finish this. The notary's waiting. I nodded, but I didn't reach for the paper yet. He saw that and hesitated. I'm not asking you to forget, he said. I know that's not possible. I looked at him. But I'd like to leave something to you, Thomas. Not because I'm dying, but because you're still here. The simplicity of that hit me harder than I expected. I stared at the contract again. The date still stared back at me, August 12th, my mother's death, my expulsion. Now, maybe, a beginning of something else. I picked up the pen. His breath caught. And then I held it out to him. Before I sign, I said, I want you to tell me why you never came looking for me. That question had lived inside me for 2 decades. It had shaped how I loved, how I trusted, how I pushed people away before they had the chance to leave. He took the pen slowly, not to write, but to hold, to think. He swallowed hard. Because I was a coward, he said. And every year that passed made it harder to believe you'd want me to. I looked away. I did, I said. Even when I hated you, I did. His hand tightened around the pen. I see that now, he whispered. Outside, the world carried on, horns in the distance, a breeze tugging at the tree branches, the faint rhythm of footsteps on the sidewalk. But in that car, time had folded in on itself. It was like we had slipped into a place where only memory existed. He turned the pen in his fingers, slowly, thoughtfully, like it might answer the questions he still didn't know how to voice. I used to sit on the front porch every August, he said, voice rough. "The year after you left. The year after we buried her. I'd sit there with a beer and tell myself, he won't come back, he shouldn't come back, not after what I did." I didn't interrupt. I thought I was protecting you. Or maybe I was just trying to make it easier to live with what I'd done. But every year when August came, I hated myself a little more. I let the silence settle between us again. I wanted to believe him. I think I did. But belief wasn't the same as healing. "You could have written," I said. "One letter. One message." "I know. But you didn't." He nodded. "I was afraid I'd only make it worse." I looked at the bracelet in my hand again. The silver shimmered faintly in the morning light. A tiny circle. Unbroken. "She would have written," I said. "She would have come after me," he nodded. "She would have." His agreement didn't feel like surrender, it felt like truth. "I tried to erase you," he said suddenly, eyes fixed on the dashboard again. "Not because I stopped loving you, but because every time I thought about you, I remembered the look on your face that day, the pain I put there, and I couldn't face that version of myself. I felt something shift in my chest, not forgiveness, not yet, but a loosening. Like a fist I didn't realize I'd been clenching. "I didn't need you to be perfect," I said. "I just needed you to stay." He looked at me then, and something in his face collapsed. His eyes welled up. No dramatics, no collapse into sobs, just quiet tears from a man who hadn't allowed himself to cry in far too long. "I know," he whispered, "and I'm sorry." The words hung in the air between us, not because they fixed anything, but because they finally existed. I took the pen from his hand. My signature didn't come easily. My hand hesitated, but I wrote it slowly, carefully, Thomas Whitaker, in a place once filled with absence. When I handed the document back, he didn't look at it. He looked at me. "Thank you," he said. And for the first time in 20 years, I heard my father say something that felt like a door opening. We didn't hug. We didn't cry together. We just sat in the stillness, letting it wrap around us like something sacred. And then, almost as an afterthought, he said, "Do you remember the photo she kept in her locket?" I shook my head. "It was of you, not me, just you, smiling, on your 10th birthday. She said it reminded her of everything she loved most." My throat tightened. "I found the locket last week," he said. "It's still in her nightstand. Why are you telling me this now?" He looked down at his hands. "Because I want you to have it." The locket. I hadn't thought about it in years, but as soon as he said it, 1,000 memories returned. My mother's soft hands, the way she used to thumb the tiny golden heart at her collarbone when she was lost in thought. She wore it every day, even when she cooked, even when she gardened. I remember once asking her what was inside, and she'd smiled and said, "My favorite thing in the world." And it was me. Not because I was special, not because I was perfect, but because I was hers. Now that locket had lived through 2 decades of silence, and somehow it had made its way back into this moment, back into a car filled with everything we never said. I stared at the dashboard, feeling the warmth drain from my hands. "You kept it?" I asked. He nodded. I couldn't throw it away, even when I couldn't look at it. There was something devastating in the way he said that, like he'd been both guarding and avoiding her memory all this time. "She would have wanted you to have it," he said again. "Then why didn't you give it to me when I left?" He looked at me, really looked at me, and his voice came low and thick. "Because I thought you'd never forgive me, and I didn't think I could bear losing her and you in the same year." That sentence broke something in me, because it was true. I hadn't forgiven him. Not then. Not fully now. But for the first time, I understood what it had cost him too. I reached for the bracelet again, fastening it carefully around my wrist. The clasp still stuck just a little. I had to press it twice before it clicked shut. He watched me do it. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a smaller envelope, aged, the flap yellowing at the corners. He offered it like it was something dangerous. Inside was the locket. I took it with both hands, carefully, reverently. It was just as I remembered. Smooth, warm, worn in the middle from years of her touch. I pressed the tiny button and opened it. There I was, 10 years old. A crooked smile and a missing front tooth standing in front of our old backyard tree. My mother must have taken the photo. My throat closed up. The weight of it all was too much. "She carried this with her every day," I said, my voice catching. "She did," he replied softly. "Even when we fought. Even when she was sick. She never took it off." We sat there just breathing, the locket resting in my hand like it had been waiting for this moment all along. The notary office was still there across the street. The driver didn't speak, didn't move. It was like the world had paused to let us catch up with it. "You could have given this to me 20 years ago," I said. "I know. And it would have changed everything." He looked away. I wasn't ready. Neither was I. But something inside me was changing now. Not fast, not clean, but real. "Thank you," I said, "for not throwing it away." His eyes met mine. I couldn't. It was the only thing that still reminded me of how to be a father. And there it was, the truth he'd buried beneath silence, beneath pride, beneath grief. The only thing louder than the pain between us was the love he didn't know how to carry. I held the locket for a long time after that, barely noticing the cool metal against my skin. It felt like holding a version of her that time hadn't touched, like a breath from the past, soft and warm and alive. My father sat quietly beside me, hands resting in his lap. He wasn't crying anymore, but his eyes hadn't stopped glistening. I think he was afraid to speak again, as if whatever we'd built in that moment might shatter under the weight of another word. "You know," I said, almost without thinking, "when you told me to leave, I waited outside the house for hours. I thought maybe you'd change your mind." His face twisted. Shame, pain, memory. He closed his eyes and let out a slow, rattled breath. "I saw you," he whispered, "from the upstairs window." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. "You saw me?" He nodded. "I stood behind the curtain and watched you sit on the porch steps. You kept checking your phone even though I knew no one was calling. I wanted to open the door. God, I wanted to. But I was so full of anger. I didn't know how to move through it. My jaw tightened. You didn't even open the door to give me a coat." He looked away, blinking fast. I hated myself for that. We sat with that for a while. No attempt to fill the silence. No attempt to soften it. "I remember the first night I spent on a stranger's couch," I said. "I kept thinking I must have done something so wrong, that maybe if I just kept my mouth shut you wouldn't have kicked me out." He winced. His shoulders sank further into his coat. "I failed you, Thomas, over and over. Why didn't you ever tell anyone what really happened that day?" He hesitated, then answered softly, "Because I couldn't tell the story without hating myself." I looked down at the bracelet again, at the letter, at the locket, all these small things she left behind, as if she'd known we'd need them someday. "She believed in us," I said. "Even when we didn't." He nodded. "I think that's what love is." Outside the window, the wind picked up slightly. A leaf scraped across the sidewalk. Somewhere, a dog barked. "I used to write her letters," I said. "After she died. I never mailed them, obviously, but I kept them. Dozens of them." He looked over at me. "Can I read them someday?" I shrugged. "Maybe." That was all I could offer. A maybe, but it was more than he'd had before. We didn't need grand gestures. Not now. Not after all this time. He leaned back into the seat, closing his eyes for a moment as if resting for the first time in years. "I'm scared of dying," he said quietly. I didn't look at him. I just nodded. "I know." "I'm not scared of the pain," he added. "I'm scared of going without fixing this." I turned toward him then. "We're not going to fix it," I said. "Not all of it, not perfectly." He opened his eyes and I held his gaze. "But we can try," I added. "And maybe that's enough." He nodded once. A deep, slow nod. We both knew the past wasn't erasable. But maybe in this car with my mother's memory between us, we'd finally stopped letting it decide everything. The notary's office still waited across the street, a dull brick building with a flickering neon open sign in the window. Neither of us made a move toward it. Papers signed or not, something more important was happening here, and we both knew it. "I want to tell you something," my father said after a long pause. "Something I've never told anyone." He shifted in his seat, staring out the windshield like he was preparing to walk barefoot over glass. "I wasn't with her when she died." I looked over, confused. "What do you mean?" He exhaled shakily. "She was in the hospital, just overnight for observation. Nothing urgent, they said. I told her I'd come first thing in the morning, but I didn't. I stayed home." His voice cracked. "I had a poker game with a few guys from work. I told myself I'd leave early. I didn't. I got the call at 3:17 a.m. My chest tightened. "She died alone?" He nodded, tears finally slipping down his cheeks. "She asked for me," the nurses said. "They thought I'd been held up. I wasn't. I thought I had more time." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear his breath catch like he was drowning in the guilt he'd carried for decades. "I blamed you," he said. "Not consciously. But in the days after, I needed someone to hold the pain for me. And you were the closest thing I could reach." I turned away, the weight of that confession pressing down hard. "That's why you snapped?" I asked, voice shaking. "Why you threw me out?" He nodded. "I couldn't face the truth of what I'd done. But you, reading her letter like that with her voice in your throat, it undid me. I saw everything I'd lost, everything I let go, and I hated myself so much. I couldn't bear to see her in you. The clarity of it made my heart ache in places I didn't know still hurt. You should have told me," I said. "I didn't know how." That excuse stopped being enough 20 years ago. He didn't argue. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the letter again. I unfolded it slowly, reading the words to myself as if trying to find a hidden line that explained how she had seen all this coming. But of course she had. My mother had always seen what we refused to face. "I think she knew this would happen," I said. "Not the details, but the distance, the silence, the way we'd both fall apart after she was gone." He nodded. "She tried to warn me, told me to talk to you, to stay close. But I was too angry, too broken." We sat there like two survivors crawling from the ruins of something we should have built together. "I still talk to her sometimes," I said, "out loud, when I can't sleep." He looked over. "I do too," he whispered. "Every night, I ask her to forgive me." A long silence. "She would," I said. He smiled faintly. "She already did. I just haven't forgiven myself yet." I looked down at the locket in my hand. "I think that's why she left this," I said, "so we wouldn't forget who we were to her." He nodded. "And maybe so we'd remember who we could be to each other." The weight between us shifted again, not disappearing, but settling into something less sharp. A wound no longer bleeding, but not yet scarred. We didn't move for a long time. There was nothing left to say, not in that moment at least. Some truths settle best in silence, not because they're easy, but because they need space to breathe. The letter rested between us again, folded but still alive. The locket lay warm in my palm, a quiet heartbeat from the past. My father wiped his face with the sleeve of his coat, no longer trying to hide the tears. I didn't judge him. For the first time in my life, I saw him not as the man who broke me, but as someone who had been broken too. "I used to think forgiveness meant pretending it didn't happen," I said. He looked at me carefully. "It doesn't," I continued. "It just means I'm tired of carrying it alone." His shoulders softened. "I'm tired too," he said, and I believed him. The driver gave a soft knock on the window from the outside, apologetic, but a reminder. Time hadn't stopped after all. The notary's office would be closing soon. I tucked the locket into the breast pocket of my shirt and reached for the document one last time. The ink from my signature had dried, but I felt like I was just now understanding what it meant. He gathered the papers, careful, as if they might fall apart. Then, slowly, he opened the door. The light outside had shifted, late afternoon sun stretching longer across the pavement. It hit his face in a way that made him look older and younger all at once. He waited for me to step out like a silent invitation. I hesitated. It was strange. For 20 years I had imagined what I'd say to him if we ever sat face to face again. I pictured yelling, maybe walking away, slamming a door that I controlled this time. But now all I could think of was my mother, and how much she would have given to see us both like this, not healed, but honest. I stepped out. We walked across the street side by side, not close enough to touch, but not distant either, like two men figuring out how to share the same path again. Inside the office, the notary was waiting, a woman in her 60s, kind face, hands folded gently on the desk. "Can I help you?" she asked. My father handed over the envelope. "I just need this notarized," he said, and witnessed. She opened the folder and examined the paperwork. "Transfer of property," she said, scanning the names. "To your son." He nodded. She looked at both of us, pausing for a moment. Maybe she saw something in our eyes. Maybe she'd seen it before. "Of course," she said gently. The process took 10 minutes. Signatures, stamps, verifications. But my mind wasn't on the paper. It was on him, my father, standing beside me, watching our names connect in ink. When it was done, the notary slid the finished document back into the folder and looked at him. "Would you like a copy for your records?" He glanced at me. "No," he said. "He can keep it." I took the folder, feeling its weight. Not just the legal kind, but the kind that comes from carrying a piece of something long broken. We stepped back into the sunlight together, and for the first time, we didn't go our separate ways. We stood outside the office for a while, letting the sun warm our faces. It was late afternoon now, the kind of light that softens everything it touches, the kind of light my mother would have loved. Neither of us spoke. I think we both understood something had shifted, gently but deeply. Not a clean slate, but a quieter page. "So," he finally said, hands tucked into his coat pockets, "what happens now?" I let the question hang there for a moment. I didn't know how to answer it. I still didn't know what he wanted from me, what I wanted from him. But I knew one thing. I'm not ready to come back into your life like nothing happened. He nodded. I wouldn't ask that. But, I continued, I might be ready to start in somewhere. His eyes met mine, and for once they didn't flinch. "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe we don't talk about the big things yet. Maybe we start with small things." "Like what?" I shrugged. "Like you telling me what you've been up to these past 20 years that isn't painful." He smiled, a quiet, surprised smile. "That won't take long," he joked, then caught himself. "Sorry." But I smiled too. The first real smile in, I don't know how long. "I live out in Oak Park now," he said. "Small apartment, 2nd floor. There's a tree outside my window that the squirrels own entirely." I laughed softly. He relaxed a bit, like he'd been holding his breath. "I go to the hardware store even when I don't need anything," he added, "just to talk to someone. You'd be surprised how much wisdom those old guys have." I looked at him closely. He wasn't trying to impress me. He wasn't trying to win me over. He was just offering something true, and I was listening. "I teach a night class sometimes," he added. "Basics of home repair, mostly for young guys trying to get certified. It's not much, but I like it." I nodded. She'd like that. He smiled again. This one stayed a little longer. "What about you?" he asked. "Where are you living now?" "South Side, near Hyde Park." "Do you like it?" "I'm still figuring that out." A pause. "I'd like to see it someday," he said cautiously, "if that's okay." I didn't answer right away, then, "Maybe." He nodded. It wasn't rejection. It wasn't an open door, but it was a start. We walked a bit, slowly, no particular direction, just moving, sharing space. "You know," he said after a while, "she used to tell me something whenever I messed up." I looked over. She'd say, "You can't rewrite the beginning, but you can still edit the ending." I stopped. I thought that was a quote from a book. "It is," he said, "but she made it feel like it was hers." I smiled. We were quiet again, but this time the silence was filled with something else. Not shame, not blame, possibility. "I don't know how long I've got," he said suddenly. I looked at him. He wasn't being dramatic, just honest. "I don't either," I replied. He nodded. "But I'd like to spend whatever's left. knowing you again." My chest tightened, but I didn't look away. "I'd like that too," I said. "Eventually." The wind picked up, carrying the sound of traffic and the faint hum of a city that never really stops. But for a moment, everything inside me did. We ended up back at the car, but neither of us climbed in right away. The shadows had grown longer, stretching across the sidewalk like reminders that the day was nearly done. He leaned against the side of the car and looked up at the sky. "You used to ask me about the stars," he said suddenly. "When you were little. You'd make me point out constellations even though I didn't know any." "I remember," I said. "You always made up names." He chuckled. "You believed me for years. Thought there was a constellation called the Giant Wrench." I smiled. "I think I still do." A quiet laugh passed between us, brief but full. It felt like some old thread stitching its way back through the air. "I think that's what I miss most," he said. "The small things." "Yeah." He turned to face me, more serious now. "Thomas, I can't fix the years I lost with you. I can't go back and unmake the man I was when she died." "I know," I said, "not out of forgiveness, but out of clarity. But I can decide what kind of man I'll be now." He looked at me carefully. "I always wondered if you turned out okay." I met his eyes. "I did. Mostly without you." He swallowed. "I'm sorry for that." "I know you are." We stood there, not moving, just letting it settle between us. After a moment, I reached into my jacket and pulled out the locket again. I opened it, glanced at the photo, then held it out to him. "Here, look." He took it, carefully, like it might shatter in his hands. "That day," I said, "she told me she took that photo because she wanted to remember me laughing. I'd just spilled lemonade all over myself." He smiled softly. "She said it was her favorite picture." He nodded, still staring at it. "I haven't laughed much since she left," he said. "Me neither." He handed it back, and as I tucked it into my pocket again, I realized something had shifted, not between us, within me. The anger, the loss, the weight of it all. It was still there, but it no longer owned me. We both turned toward the car. "I could give you a ride home," he offered. "I'm parked around the corner," I said. A pause, then, Would you come by sometime?" he asked. "No expectations, just maybe a coffee." I looked at him. The father who threw me out. The man who let years rot between us like fruit left too long on the vine. The one who carried her memory like a wound, and who finally, put words to the silence. "I'll think about it," I said. He didn't flinch, didn't ask for more. "Okay," he said softly. He opened the car door and paused before stepping in. "Thomas?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad you came today, even if it took this long." I nodded. "So am I." He climbed into the car, and I stood there, watching the door close behind him. As the vehicle pulled away, something unexpected filled my chest. Not relief, not closure, something smaller, something quieter. Hope. The car disappeared down the street, and I stood on the sidewalk for a long time, the late sun painting gold across the concrete. I pressed my hand over the locket in my pocket, feeling its weight, its warmth from my chest. It was strange how something so small could carry so much history, grief, memory, and now, maybe, redemption. I walked to my own car slowly. Every step felt heavier than the last, like my body hadn't yet caught up with what my heart had started to understand. When I got in and shut the door, the silence returned. But it was different now. Not hollow, not angry, just quiet. I sat there for a while, the engine off, the world moving on around me, and I thought about her. I imagined her sitting in the kitchen with her tea, reading a paperback novel and humming softly to herself. I thought about her handwriting in the margins of books, her perfume in the hallway, her laughter in the backyard. And I imagined her watching us today, me and my father. I imagined her not saying a word, just smiling that patient, knowing smile of hers. the one that said, "I knew you could." And maybe she had. I didn't call anyone that evening. I didn't check my email or scroll through my phone. I drove home in near silence, except for the occasional stretch of static on the radio. When I reached my apartment, I went straight to the old shoebox in the back of my closet. The one with the letters, dozens of them, written over years, some barely legible, the ink smeared from tears, others more like journal entries, written just to feel like someone was listening. I sat on the floor, opened the box, and took one out at random. It was dated August 12th, 10 years ago. "Dear Mom, I'm still mad. I don't know if I'll ever stop being mad, but I miss you anyway." I folded it again. My handwriting had changed. My anger, too. I didn't know what I would do with the letters now. Maybe I'd burn them. Maybe I'd give one to him. Maybe I'd just let them stay, right where they'd always been. That night, I placed the locket on my nightstand. I didn't wear it, but I didn't put it away either. It felt right for it to be close enough to feel like she was still here somewhere, quietly holding the space between us. I slept with the window open for the first time in months. The air was cool and the sounds of the city felt comforting, not invasive. I didn't dream, but when I woke, I reached for the bracelet on my wrist. It was still there, and so was something else, the beginning of peace. 3 weeks passed before I heard from him again. It was a postcard, simple, faded, with a photo of Lake Michigan on the front. No envelope, just a message in neat handwriting I didn't recognize at first. But it was his. "Thomas, the squirrels have claimed the whole tree now. Coffee's still waiting. Dad." That was all, no apologies, no pressure, just an open door. I set the postcard on my kitchen counter and stared at it for a long time. I didn't pick up the phone. I didn't rush over. I just let it be, the way you let a wound breathe when it's finally stopped bleeding. A few days later, I found myself near Oak Park for work. My hands shook on the steering wheel when I passed his street. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. But I looked. And for the first time, I wondered what it would feel like to knock on his door without anger in my chest. I thought about everything that had brought us here. The silence, the years, the weight of grief, and the day in the back seat of a rental car when everything stopped, because of a date, because of memory, because something finally cracked open. I thought about the locket, now hanging beside my keys on a small hook near the door. I thought about my mother's letter, and how her voice still echoed through both of us, gently guiding what was left of a broken family towards something we never thought we'd find again. Not repair, not restoration, but connection. Quiet, imperfect, fragile, real. One morning, near the end of September, I drove back to Oak Park. I parked on his street under the wide-armed tree where the squirrels had built their little kingdom. I stood across the street, hands in my pockets, watching the second-floor window where the curtain moved slightly in the breeze. I didn't have the locket with me. I didn't bring the letters. I didn't need anything in my hands. I walked across the street and stood in front of his building. My heart raced. I felt 17 and 48 all at once. Then I climbed the steps. I raised my hand and knocked. Once, twice. Silence. Then, footsteps. Slow, cautious. The door opened, just a crack. He looked at me through the gap, unsure. Then he opened it wider. He didn't smile, neither did I, but we saw each other, really saw each other, and he said simply, "Coffee's on." I stepped inside, not to erase the past, not to fix everything, but to begin again. Now it's your turn. What would you have done in Thomas's place? Have you ever held onto a silence that cost you years with someone you love? Tell us in the comments. Don't just watch. Be part of this story. Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. If this story moved you even a little, share it with someone who understands what it's like to carry a family wound in silence. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. We're telling the stories no one else dares to say out loud. And before you go, watch the next video that's about to appear on your screen. Trust me, it will stay with you.